A well-known piece of Professor Skye lore is that I'm really afraid of one thing. That's death. That's just not existing. It keeps me up at night, and I think about it a lot. Hopefully, I'll never die. We'll see. So far, so good. But, part of the issue is if I do die, then I don't know what comes next. And I like to think of myself as a kind of Christian, sort of a mystic way. And I like to think about heaven, but my issue is when I think about heaven, anything I could conceive of as heaven would end up being hell. Because if it's eternity, no matter how nice it is, I can't really picture it. And in particular, I often think about certain images, like images of arriving in heaven and what greets you. So here's a 15th century from Catalan in Spain, an image of these angels singing to you. And that's often the image. You arrive at the gates and you have these voices, or you have this from the great Ghent altarpiece, which, true story, my grandfather saved from the Nazis himself with the rest of his unit. We sort of have this image when you arrive at the pearly gates. You've spent an entire life of virtue, and you hear something, that doesn't sound like heaven to me. You know what I want? If heaven exists, who I want singing to me? I want someone or some people who can sing in a way that helps me feel that connection to something otherworldly, something spiritual, something ineffable. I'm thinking like Sam Cooke or early Harry Nilsson, or perhaps best of all, what if you went to heaven and you had James Blake and Lil Yachty at the gates? Each one of them has the kind of voice that is totally unmistakable, totally longing, totally yearning, completely heavenly. Even though, of course, they're just earthly human beings and they're alive right now, so, none of this quite works. But when I think about, angels, when I think about angels singing, I think of James Blake and I think of Lil Yachty. Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show, hosted by a French professor who's taking you on a long way to really appreciate this project, because I almost did a different thing. So I've been playing around with this idea of doing reviews pretending that I'm 5 years in the future. And I could imagine 5 years in the future, everybody flocking to this project and saying, oh, this is one of the greatest albums of the decade. As we're getting to the end of the 2020s and we say, look at these two guys, they were both so influential and so important in so many different genres. They were so experimental. Everything they were doing was just hitting and hitting and hitting and going beyond genres, constantly beyond genres, which is why, of all the things I've read about this album, the most frustrating is when people say that it's unexpected. Not only does Lil Yachty work in other genres now, like psychedelic rock, and James Blake has always had his toe, sometimes his entire foot, sometimes his entire leg, sometimes his entire body in hip-hop and soul and R&B, but they both know how to play in this new genreless swamp that we live in, and they know how to do it, and they know how to build it up and make it better and better and better, which makes this collaboration, if anything, kind of expected. We don't expect these kinds of collaboration at all, so in that way we should just be thankful. That's how I feel. I just feel thankful that this exists, that these two heavenly voices are collaborating, and these two very, very trend-setting, trailblazing artists come together to make this, which might not be the sum of its parts, or it may be. I'll get there in a second. Now, when I'm thinking about how to compare this, sort of historically, kind of historically, I have a CD here that I want to compare this pairing to, and you might be thinking, well, what are some of the great collaborative albums? You might Best of Both Worlds with R. Kelly and Jay-Z. It was actually kind of disappointing. Maybe Watch the Throne. Maybe David Byrne and St. Vincent. The thing is, the relationships between all of these artists doesn't quite work. What I want to try to find as a comparison is artists who don't work in totally different zones, but work in similar zones, whose visions are totally compatible, and when they come together, they create something that reminds you of their individual greatness, that may not be up to the standard of their individual greatness, but is something else and is something wonderful. which means I think I'm going to be the only reviewer on YouTube to make this comparison. This is the closest thing to Chester and Lester, the album by Chet Atkins and Les Paul. So if you don't know, this is a delightful, charming album from 1976 featuring the great country guitarist Chet Atkins and Les Paul, who is a great jazz guitarist. And they come together, and it's not like they're totally incompatible. They're not from wildly different worlds. Les Paul started off doing country and moved in. Like they're these really great musicians who are just having an absolute ball. And let me tell you, when I go up to heaven, if there's some people playing guitar together, I don't want it to just be, oh, look, there's Hendrix and Django Reinhardt and Jerry Garcia playing together. Like, that might be fun, but it might not be as harmonious or as gorgeous as even something as simple as Chet Atkins and Les Paul. I think they're both dead. Chet Atkins might still be out there. You can tell me in the comments. And again, we come to this question of all collaborative projects, are they better than the sum of their parts? Which I don't think is really the point. Because, the Lil Yachty album from last year was almost my album of the year. It's just amazing. I like James Blake's most recent album. I mean, I don't think it's as good as Only Friends Will Break Your Heart. Is it Only Friends? No, Friends That Break Your Heart. I don't think it's necessarily to that level, but still, they are both, like, if we can consider artists to have a prime the same way we can imagine an athlete to have a prime, they are both absolutely squarely in their prime. They are in their year 25 season, okay? And they are just going full bore. So what happens with this combination is you just have to set your expectations differently. You have to think of it in a way similar to this. Like, what would happen if these guys who are friends and having fun kind of get together and do something? Now, in a way, it's sort of a disservice. Like, the cover to the album, which I'll show you if you haven't seen it, is sort of a disservice to the project itself because it's funny and it's cute. It's got, look, he's got beans on toast because English people eat that. Like, they really eat that. They really eat that. That's what they eat. Oh my God. And you got tea because he's British in his hand and he's white and ebony and ivory and he's got a cup, even though I thought Lil Yachty was sober. I thought he was sober, so why does he have a double cup there? I don't know. I'm not his hall monitor. But, there's something about this that's maybe a little too cute. But that's the nature of these collaborative projects. There's always something kind of cute. My friend and I used to listen to this album and just crack up because we would enjoy reading it as being sort of coded as gay. And like the way they would communicate to each other is like they were vigorous lovers. They weren't, but when you listen to this album sometime, you really should. It's quite fun. That's a fun way to read it. But we were just goofing around because they were having so much fun just being together and making things together. And the problem is, it's the great Rock and Roll Hall of Fame debate. Problem. There's never been a good performance of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, ever. In the history of the whole goddamn building, it's just the greatest musicians of all time. They get together and they play like Johnny B. Good, and it's just the worst thing ever. When you're having fun and you're with people who you respect, sometimes that becomes the center, which is why I really want to praise this project. I particularly want to praise this project because the truth of the matter is it is an album. It is not two dudes who respect each other and just pump something out, whatever. There is a fil conducteur. There's a thesis, a driving force behind this album, a primary theme, which is the difficulty of life, of manhood, of responsibility, of fame. Like, these are two dudes who throughout the entire album just feel like they have all this pressure on them. And they don't know how to react. They don't know how to respond. It's sort of a fight or flight, and they are basically constantly in flight throughout this entire album. Which is why I think in 5 years from now, when we revisit what are the best albums of the 2020s, this will probably slip its way into the top 20. Because let me tell you something. When I listened to it for the first two times, as a music critic, I'm sitting there and I'm listening carefully, and I saw Fantano's review. I didn't think it was bad. I understood his points. He gave it a 5, I think. A lot of his points were sort of like, they don't really build to something, and the songwriting isn't as good. At least he didn't criticize the mixing. I hate it when he does that. But, it was like, in general, it was like a fairly well-taken point. Which is why you also need the living room test. So I put, my wife really likes James Blake. My kids really like Lil Yachty. ever since we got this. This is literally the first thing of Lil Yachty I never even heard his music before I saw that he had Reese's Puffs, and I bought them. I only have one of the 4 boxes. I have to track down the other 4. You know, so like everybody in my family loves either James Blake or Lil Yachty, and so I just put it on. And let me tell you, this album fills a house. It fills a house with beautiful textures and atmosphere, and always these angelic voices. The robotic angel of Lil Yachty. And then the of James Blake. Those two things going together. Not quite as well as I just did it, but still, they do their best. You know, like those two things coming together, like I just predict it. I just predict it. You come back. You know, you do a timestamp. You see what happens at the end of this decade. If we don't all come back to this album and say, yeah, I don't know what we were expecting, but they really delivered. If you like what you see, type in AVAA. It stands for Awesome Videos Always. Smash the like button, subscribe. I got a Patreon. I released a song from my band from 1998 that's never been released because we never released any music. So look that up too. Misspelt Youth, YUTH, and that's a fun thing you could do. So let me go through the album. Normally I have like a stamp, an example song, but I'm just going to start at the beginning because I think not only does it lay out the entire concept of what is going to happen sort of sonically and atmospherically, but it also lyrically sets everything up with Save the Savior. Mournful synth notes, a total surprise. The first word. Do you know the first word of this album? Say it with me. No, I'm not going to say it. That's one of those words I don't say. Which is an interesting choice on Lil Yachty's part because obviously he's working with a white collaborator. I don't quite know why, but it's this whole verse and he's like mad at his agent and he seems embarrassed about the wealth of his chain and his grandmother's embarrassed. And this actually reminds me very strongly of a wonderful song by the French rapper Nino Tutonguchi where he's just talking about how embarrassed he is in front of his family with how much money he has and how his mother's in a castle and this low rumbling bass comes in and God damn it, it is so good. James Blake. James Blake, ladies and gentlemen. Not only does he have a voice that can go, but he also just knows how to bring in little tiny production elements that you just want to wrap yourself in. Somebody save the savior. So like you might think this is like some kind of power trip, but it's not. They are the saviors of their family. Lil Yachty saved his grandmother, saved his mother, helps his sister. He's trying to make all this money. He has all this weight on him. I just mentioned Jerry Garcia. And Jerry Garcia died because he made a lot of terrible self-destructive life choices. But also he kept touring. And he kept touring because if he didn't tour, thousands of people didn't have a job. You know, like when you're this rich and this famous and when you have this much power, there's so many people who depend on you. You are people's savior. So who's going to save the savior? Who's going to watch the watchman? Who's going to save the savior? And just when you think you're all done, that's just one of the angels. Now we got to get the Blake comes in so strong and so good. He gives himself little tinkling synth arpeggios behind. Who's got them the way I've got you? You know, it's not a power trip. It's just exhaustion. I'm exhausted by the end of the day, carrying you not some, but all of the way. And listen, I'm going to tell you I relate to this album personally, okay? I have 3, soon to be 4 kids, okay? I have a wonderful wife. I have a very taxing job. I'm a chair of my department. I'm a Senate president. And up until recently, I was also, you know, the primary person taking care of my father before he passed. You know, the amount of time that I have felt just like all of this adult responsibility just on my shoulders. It's part of why this channel's so great, because it's like a thing I do for myself that isn't someone else, like, you know, help me, you know, and it's great. That's what life is. That's what being an adult is. Now, if you happen to be a man, that's what being a man is. If you happen to be a woman, that's what being a woman is. If you happen to be a non-binary adult, then that's what being a non-binary adult is. But that's the problem. It's miserable, man. Damn it. It's so hard. And I love it. I love that this whole album is about that, coming from 2 different people, from 2 different upbringings. Next track is In Grey, which is probably my least favorite track on the album. It starts off with this kind of faraway sounds and some flute things. If I fall, catch me. But again, it's this idea he's like depressed, he's living in grey. And the way that I feel the cohesion in this album. This feels like this is the weight. And the problem is when you are the caryatid of your own family. Caryatid is the, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Caryatid, maybe? If you ever see like a ancient Greek sculpture, a temple, they are the sculptures that are holding up the building. You know how they do that sometimes? So if you're the caryatid for your whole family, it can be depressing. And then you feel like you don't have anyone to help you out. So you're just kind of stuck there. Blake, if we all behaved like me, we'd all be lonely. It's so dour. This album's such a bummer. And then some like house style music comes in, some jungle, and then Yachty comes back, and almost an industrial outro, and the voice is all scratched up and messed up. Then we get to the song Midnight. This was how the whole angel framing device came to me, because I was in my kitchen listening to this song while I was preparing my daughter. Her new favorite food is bananas and cannellini beans. She calls them ba-bee. Banana beans. So anyways, they don't go together, but she doesn't know. She's almost 2 years old. So I'm preparing her cannellini beans and her bananas, and I hear this singing, and I just say, they're angels. They're angels, goddammit. The voice is super altered by Yachty, this great tremolo echo style. We Can Hold On to Midnight. Blake comes in, just always like weaving in together. This isn't, one of the problems I had with something like Best of Both Worlds by R. Kelly and Jay-Z is that I didn't really feel the collaboration that much. It felt like they did something together, but they didn't feel totally woven together. This feels so woven together because they are sort of brothers from different mothers, not in terms of their life experience or their social standing or whatever, but just in their perspective. By the way, shame on you for not watching my Faye Webster video. I did a whole video on Faye Webster, who had a song with Yachty about the greatness of Atlanta. You should check it out. It was a good video. At times, Yachty is just... he just doesn't care. He doesn't care. He'll just say something goofy like, we had to kidnap the sun. That's just goofy. And then we get to this whole point with the staggered Baroque synth sounds. This is where we're in heaven. This is broke down heaven. This is... Oh my God. And then, Blake is organic and Yachty is electronic. And then Blake starts singing about when our souls leave our bodies, hell, it's not like that's even the end. Because when you return, I know you've finally broken this spell. We are lifting out of our bodies. We are in this little zone. And I'm just telling you, this is why I love doing this channel. This is why I review 3 to 5 new albums a week, despite the fact I have all those responsibilities. This is the joy in my life, is art. This is the greatest thing, in my opinion, I can do with my time, is constantly experience art and human creativity and have things that give me like a feeling of satisfaction and joy, the same way that I felt the first time I heard, Day Tripper by the Beatles and thought it was a great riff and couldn't believe that someone wrote it, or whatever, the first time I heard Public Enemy, all these great feelings you can possibly have. This little Baroque, harpsichordy, little interstitial thing here, even if the rest of the album sucked, which it doesn't, the whole project makes itself worth it just for this one moment, this one song, where James Blake once again proves that he is like the guy. Okay. Woo! Is the next song. It's called Woo. More kind of EDM, straightforward EDM, kind of thump, 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 some staggered hi-hat. It's more a rap style, and that's what's so funny is like, what genre is this? Is this rap? Come on, it's not rap. It's not really EDM. It's you know what this album is like? It's like if James Blake and Lil Yachty did an album together. That's just what this sounds like. I love the how this builds up to the release, and you think it's going to be a party. This whole album doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about you wanting bops. Hey, you, Gen Z, Millennial, whatever you are, Gen Xer, Boomer, if you're sitting there, you want a bop? You want a bop? You don't got bops. And there's no bops. As they would say in my wife's mother tongue, Nia Bapu. There's just none. So, I don't know if I declined that properly. So it says woo like it's a party, but it's mournful. And then Blake just shows off his range. And, he's just one of those guys where he has this range that he doesn't always use. And when he uses it well, you're just so thankful. And then the song completely rips off Dark Horse by Katy Perry. I don't know why. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so like you have 4 notes at one note, at one tone, and then you go down a half step for 3, and then one more step for the 8th note in those 2 bars. So it's dun 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 dun. It's the same thing, but then he keeps going down as opposed to repeating. Still, it's great. Yachty comes back. All this kind of imagery of veins. Lots of stuff about veins. It might be possible to read this whole thing as like drugs and recovery, because there's such an emphasis on veins and blood. Like the next song, Bad Cameo, kind of distorted and slow. Like it changes sound on every bar, where it's like, I'm sure it's like just someone like pressing a button in the studio, every bar just going from it has that kind of change, feeling through my blood, my veins, high-pitched voice. And then we get what I believe to be the first actual duet. And that's, okay, if I could complain about one thing, I would love more duets, them actually both singing together, both of the angelic voices. And it ends with this very dark feeling, don't let me down a dark path. That's a sad thing to say. Again, that's sadder. Do you even love me? Do you even love me? This is a really sad album. And again, I really feel like it's on this whole theme of just being overburdened. That's what it is. These 2 men are overburdened. They're so overburdened, they have to do Reese's Puffs cereal boxes. Then we get to the song Missing Man, which is a little waltz. Now this is where, if I could take up any kind of umbrage with Fantano's review, is I think he missed this point. This isn't actually about, I don't think, about absent fathers. I mean, in particular, I don't know about James Blake's situation. We know that Lil Yachty has a great relationship with his dad, that his dad was essentially like hip-hop royalty in Atlanta, a great photographer, took the pictures of, Tupac and Outkast and all that. I mean, he's not a Nepo baby, because it didn't really help him, but still, like, whatever the trope is of the rapper whose dad's missing, that is not Lil Yachty at all, and he's never pretended it was. I think this is about something different and perhaps more relatable to more people. Remember how I was talking to you about that responsibility, the crushing responsibility you can have as an adult? And for this case, we're talking about 2 men, so I'm going to put this in the framing of men. So when I say like how to be a man, I don't mean like men have some kind of inalienable responsibility. I just mean in the case I'm a man, they're men, okay? The pressures of being a man can lead you to just run. Now, I had a friend, she was a very close friend of mine. We don't really talk anymore. But she had a husband who I thought was fine, a fine enough guy. Except he would disappear for like 2 days, 3 days. And he'd come back and they wouldn't talk about it. Like, I don't know. He just went somewhere. He's a great dad though. When he's here, he's great. Oh. Yeah, no, that sounds great. No, I'm not scared for you. No. That's not the reddest of flags. But I understand. I understand where he came from. Now, I'm lucky enough that whatever my constitution is, or I've been through enough therapy, I've never wanted to leave. But I understand. Like, I don't understand leaving your family. But I do understand, like, freaking the hell out. Just like, I don't know, driving to Montreal for 3 days and like going to a couple of comedy shows and watching a Canadiens game and then driving back and just being here and just being able to do that. It's about like, this is the heart of the album, because it just keeps on saying you just need to reset. And that's the thing. That's the idea. Like, you just need to reset. And part of being a man, part of being an adult, is figuring out how to reset without hurting your family, which is what this song is. Missing man. They're missing. When you need to reset, you can't just go all Walter White and just disappear. You got to actually be a man. Unlike Walter White, who's a piece of shit who I hate. He's the worst piece of garbage ever. And if you look up to Walter White, go to therapy right now. Skylar's the only virtuous character in that entire show. Adult. Anyways, sorry. I've been rewatching Breaking Bad. It makes me mad that some people my age look up to that piece of human garbage. But That's neither here nor there. What is here is this idea, and Yachty calls himself a milk carton boy, because that's the truth. That friend of mine whose husband would disappear sometimes for days, did he have an affair? I don't know. Did he just go to a flop house? Did he go on a bender? I don't know what it is, but when you do that, you become a boy. You become a not adult. You become a not man, a not woman, a not non-binary adult. You just become a kid, because we got responsibilities, and you got to live up to them. And this album will tell you how hard it is. Like on the next song, Twice, a little bit more upbeat, more layers and layers of weirdness. There's a barking noise in this. Poor Toby, man. Toby's been getting a lot of love on my channel lately. He's an important dog. You know, I have 2 dogs. Bo, he's pretty sick. But Toby, he's doing well. He's a little bit younger. And this song made him bark. I can't play the song. I just keep skipping this song because Toby hears this. He gets the wide ears and starts barking because there's actual barking noise in the back. If you count on me, count twice. At first, I thought this was at complete odds with the previous song, but I don't think so, because I think the idea is that, like, you know, have you ever been a chaperone? You've probably been chaperoned. So, like, I've had to chaperone. You know, you chaperone kids to the science museum in your local town. You know, whatever, you work an after school program, you work as a teacher, whatever it is. You got to count all the kids. You know, and like if one's missing, you have to count again. Like you have to count twice. Like. You have to count twice. You have to be careful. This might not be a fully reliable human being. Great beef. Sorry, it's lunchtime. I'm hungry. Great beat change. Kind of warbled soul guitar. And then Yachty does kind of a fake ad-lib thing. I don't know. The main thing I like is how much he sounds like. His accent is the exact... Okay. The reason that... people do things that seem racist, like say that people look alike in different cultures or different races, is because they have a lack of exposure, which means they can't tell the difference. So when I went to Japan, a lot of people said I look just like Brad Pitt. Now that's not racism, it's that they don't see enough faces that look like mine, so that the differences between my face and Brad Pitt's face, which there are a few, you know, like they couldn't actually see the difference between them, right? So I hear this, and I hear his accent as being very similar to Andre 3000's accent. And that just that just makes me happy. That makes me think like, oh, is that like a black Southern accent of an artsy dude? Like, is there like a niche? Because like I've heard other, you know, rappers from Atlanta speak, and they don't sound like that. One thing I do like about here is the way he says negatives will never come to light. Just the way he says light. Listen, there's probably some kids out there right now who listen to this album nonstop, and it's going to get wrapped into their lexicon. And that's one thing they will say. It will never come to light. Transport Me, almost like a vaporwave sound here. This 80s soul sample, very compressed synth. This, truthfully, I couldn't tell the difference who was singing here. Was it Blake or Yachty at the beginning? A great rap bit, these ominous, growing bass sounds. And this is a little bit off the theme. I don't know, this is sort of frustration with a relationship. But all the way throughout, you know, Yachty and Blake could just be doing random stuff. Just talking about random stuff, you know. Blake could be, I don't know, mad at Brexit, and Yachty could just be talking about cars and stuff like that. But here it's like this sense of disappointment in this messed up relationship. I could show you my life, show you the life through my lens, and talking about how I have all this money. Great Yachty cringe lyric, I wish you were Santa. Another beat change, very simple drum line, almost like a little that siren sound. Kind of a party vibe here. That's the whole thing, you know? It's like, we're not dancing here. This is sad. Run away from the rabbit. More runaway imagery. Do you see how much of this album is about running away and feeling overburdened? Gentle sounds, almost kind of like saxophony. Run away from the rabbit, trying to figure out my kind. I like that lyric. Piano and sweeping sound. More Blake singing, when things are looking up, I might not believe in love. You know, like relationships here are very, very fragile and elusive. From the last song to this one, we have the sense these are both very lonely, overburdened people. And then I don't know what this other voice is. Like, it doesn't sound like Blake or Yachty. It's super high. It must be modified. And again, it's like at the very, very end, it sounds like a saxophone solo, but it's actually a voice. The album ends with Red Carpet. Of all the, going back to the primary Fantano comparison, I don't like, I usually don't watch this stuff before I do my reviews, but I was just curious because I couldn't get like a feeling. Like part of me felt that the entire world would just say, this is the greatest, or that people would be like, this is trash. I didn't expect the kind of the mid take, but of the complaints of the album barely forming, I'd say this is the song truly that forms the least. It does build a little bit with Yachty's singing, but he's worried about himself and his nature. And, it seems to be, again, about the red carpet and the pressures of fame. And the thing is that pressures of fame seem to compound the pressures of adulthood that themselves are the pressures of being a good father, son, husband, boyfriend, whatever, right? So it all makes sense thematically, but it's not the strongest ending. So these are my Patreons. They help me to buy music. I'm probably going to buy this album because we just love it. We love this album in my house, except for Toby. He does not like that one song. So you can go to my Patreon. You can check it out, huh? There's some exclusive, there's probably 50 exclusive videos there. I do a lot of unboxing and stuff like that. Kind of random chats, kind of behind the scenes stuff. And there you go. All right. Until next time.